Hey Jay, thanks for being with us today.
It's a pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about your background. What did you do prior to founding your own company?
Sure. So I was actually born in New York, and I went to university in the U.S., and then I went to England to do what I thought would be a one-year master's degree at the London School of Economics. That was, 13 years ago. I finished the master's degree, but I started a business right out of grad school called eCourier. And eCourier was a business that was trying to take a very traditional industry, same-day delivery, and use technology to make it scalable and sexy. And so we got some investment, built some pretty big business. I met some really amazing people. We solved and patented some technology in on-demand logistics and on-demand scheduling. And then about a year ago, or 2 years ago, I wanted to start another business, and I started to get the band back together with some of the people I worked with before, and we started to think a lot about personal transportation. And personal transportation is really interesting to the point of obsession with me because it's sort of the grown-up big brother to the same-day delivery industry. It's a larger market, it's a consumer market, it's regulated, but it has a lot of the same dynamics. It's highly regionalized, highly fragmented, and fundamentally inefficient, right? So in every city in the world, it's the same. Taxi drivers have 30 to 50% of their time spent desperately looking for passengers, while people find it really difficult to get a taxi. There's no one to put them together. And so we knew very early on that smartphones were going to be pivotal to solving this problem, but we didn't see anybody in the world that really had cracked it, had created what we felt was a defensible strategy for creating really, really quick, high-scaled, highly liquid networks connecting passengers and taxi drivers. And so and what's interesting, by the way, about this business, about the taxi business, which has become a very hot business in the consumer space and in the venture capital space now, is it's sort of like the quintessential mobile application. You know what? It's the application that you're mobile, the taxi drivers are mobile, there's matchmaking, there's notifications, there's payment, there's real time, there's all of these different factors coming into play, and you have this great, interface between, the product that you're actually in the service that you're trying to deliver and the real world, which makes it fun because it's almost impossible to do perfectly right all the time. Anyway, so we got together in London and we met up with 3 London black cab drivers, Terry, Russ, and Gary, in a cafe in West London, and we really hit it off, and we had a great time, and we talked for hours, and we always knew that in order to properly, really crack this problem, we need to understand both the driver mentality and the driver point of view, as well as the customer equation. And actually, what we saw in the market, and it's still true today, every other business in our space, they all look at those problems that I've outlined through the lens of the consumer, because that's what they know. They've ridden in the back of taxi cabs, but they haven't actually driven them. And so what the traditional models that we're up against are, they try and optimize as much as they can the passenger experience. They focus on the passenger experience, and they say, if only we can get the passengers, we'll get the drivers, because they'll be drawn in by the incremental volume. But that doesn't really work, because you can't possibly oversupply customers, so you always have to manage this really tight equilibrium between supply and demand if you're only promising drivers more business. So we wanted a way to fundamentally oversupply the market with drivers, and to have always more drivers than we needed so that customers would get a great experience. And through our conversations with Terry, Russ, and Gary, we discovered that actually, ironically, the way to create the best consumer experience, the most scalable business models, and the most defensible networks was to focus first on the driver, and put drivers first, and then to focus on the passengers. And so this driver's first mentality is really core to what makes Hailo different, and it manifests itself in 2 important ways. One is the way in which the business is managed. So we have Terry, Russ, and Gary in London, but we have 3 taxi drivers, at least, in every city in which we launch in. And they are key managers in the city, and and they are responsible for localizing the product, making sure that the product will actually work for drivers in that particular city. They're responsible for recruiting, educating, and managing the driver community to make sure that we have an engaged pool of drivers who understands what they're doing and is really, delivers exceptional customer service. And then they give the continuous feedback. They feedback information from the drivers and the customers to make sure that we're always improving the product and the service. The second thing is the general strategy and the go-to-market strategy. What we do is we have two phases. We view our challenge in the first phase as creating an app for drivers that they run on their own personal smartphones. That the challenge to us is we want to make it so engaging that they want to use it even when there aren't any customers that we're pumping onto the network directly. We want it to be a sort of driver's personal companion in the same way, and as essential to the trade of driving a taxi as Photoshop is to the trade of being a graphic designer. And the way in which we do that is we learn from Terry, Russ, and Gary and speaking to drivers, what are the problems? What are the pain points that drivers actually experience when they're on the road? And they all fall into two categories, isolation and profit maximization. And so we deliver a suite of tools. It's a very advanced suite of tools that allow them to make their day more sociable, their shift more profitable, by finding information, and allowed by finding information on the street about where there are passengers likely waiting for taxis, what's going on with traffic in a way that's more immediate and granular than any other source of information, and what's going on at the airport, where should I go next, what's going on at the taxi stand at a particular hotel. And what's interesting is this is all information that the market already had. Some drivers would keep a logbook of their own, day. We have that digitized. Some drivers would be calling other drivers, their friends, to see, what's going on at the airport. All we've done is we've used smartphone technology to really scale and productize, and institutionalize that shared knowledge. And what that's done is it's created a system where taxi drivers use this tool to be more efficient in their daily life and that way we get them to engage with the application all day, not just when they're doing Hailo hails. When we get enough drivers using that driver-only network, and we'll build the community around that, only then do we launch to passengers. And what that means is, by the time that we launch to passengers, we already have a critical mass of hundreds or thousands of drivers that are using this system daily. And that means that actually we really nail that first-time consumer experience, so that the minute that you get the app out, you get a quick service, you get a convenient ride. The second thing is that fundamentally we're always oversupplied. We always have more drivers than we need at any point in time because we have a lot of drivers, a network that's very, very wide, but very, very shallow. We have almost all the drivers in any city that we want to sign up, but they're each doing a very small amount of incremental business, incremental hails they wouldn't have otherwise have received. What that means is, from a customer perspective, you've always got a lot of available cabs around you, and so it creates an experience for consumers that is as quick as hailing off the street, but a lot more convenient. You pay automatically with your credit card. Everything uses existing infrastructure in terms of the meter. And at the end of the ride, you just walk, you jump right out of the cab. By the time you hit the sidewalk, you've gotten an email receipt. Everything's charged to your card. It takes a very simple, everyday experience that has a lot of friction and anxiety, and it makes it effortless. And that's really what we try and do. And so that model, we've been focused on that model from day one. And, I've been around the startup game long enough to know how rare it is that your view of the world and your initial business plan is very often very different down the line. But actually, I've been saying the same thing since day one. The only difference is it's actually worked, and we've actually got quite significant adoption of the system now on a global basis. So it's hard to believe, but literally 1 year ago was when we started distributing the app to consumers in London. That was when we first started trading. You fast forward to today, we have over a third of London's 23,000 drivers that are on Hailo and growing rapidly. And we have hundreds of thousands of customers, and we are delivering to drivers, and we're processing over $1 million a week in transactions in London alone. So this system has really taken off and exceeded all of our expectations. So in March, we closed a very large Series A investment round. We have some of what I believe to be the world's best investors. We had the $17 million Series A led by Excel, including both their Palo Alto fund and their London fund. We also have the Skype founder Nicholas Enstrom, his investment fund in London. He's personally involved with the business, as well as Wellington Partners, which did this Series A in Spotify, and is also a fantastic investor. So we raised $20 million in total, and we wanted to use that to take what we had built in London and to really scale it around the world. And the only reason we've been able to get this far this fast, I believe substantially, is because we have such an amazing and dedicated team. Not only do I actually 5 other wonderful co-founders, including people that I've worked with before, who are frankly in many areas much older and smarter than I am. But also we've got an engineering team that rivals the best in Silicon Valley. We work very hard to get them. We have the former COO of Shazam that's leading the team. We've got Google PhDs working on our Android device. We've got a head of QA who has a degree in evolutionary psychology. So it is a great and efficient team, and we are really trying to build out something faster and further than anybody has ever done.
And how many people are involved currently?
So we've got about 100 people around the world, mostly in engineering, but right now they're mostly centered between London and New York, as well as operational staff in the cities. So Dublin was our first international city, which we did in early July, and same exact playbook. Great general manager, find 3 great taxi drivers who believe in what we're doing. Get the taxi drivers first, then get the customers, and it went off like a rocket ship. And it hasn't stopped since. It is growing faster than London did in its early stages, not just on a like-for-like basis, but in terms of absolute numbers of revenue and registrations in a much smaller city. So they are, within 2 months, became the largest taxi service in all of Ireland, and are now growing to levels that nobody has ever seen. The business is just doing tremendously. So after that, we crossed the Atlantic and went to Toronto, which we launched. On the day that we launched, we were the 2nd largest taxi service in the city. We then did Boston. Last week we did Chicago. And I'm here in New York, where we hope to launch at the earliest the end of late this year or early next year, depending on the regulatory situation in New York. The good news is that we knew, and I knew 6 months ago when I moved back, that New York was a real opportunity for us because the taxi commissioner and the mayor were saying that they wanted to bring this technology in. And lo and behold, as of last week, they have released a draft of the rules for granting licenses to businesses like ours that provide e-hailing technology. So this is a really exciting and global business, and I'm just really honored to be a part of it and to watch what we've created spread so far so fast.
How do you search for taxi drivers? Is it sort of training they need to go, or you just look for the best one? And how do you convince them, actually?
Yeah, so the first thing is, the first challenge is finding the driver partners. These are the drivers that are going to become managers. They're going to work. They still drive their cabs, but they work most of the time in the business. And once we get them, they are responsible for going out and actually recruiting other drivers. They start with their friends. They go out they literally go out with iPads to places where taxis congregate, to airports, to train stations. They talk to taxis. They sell them. They explain the system. They explain what it's doing for drivers. They explain that it's making drivers up to 30% more money and making them have a better day. And they explain that it was founded by taxi drivers. So it is a system that cares about their needs. And really from that point on, it becomes a word of mouth thing where the taxi drivers tell other taxi drivers. We have referral programs, and it spreads like wildfire throughout the community. And ultimately, it becomes the case where taxi drivers just say, there's no reason not to be on it, and that's certainly the stage that we're getting to in London right now, with over 8,000 registered drivers.
Wow. So how does the business model work? What's the commission you charge?
So the general idea behind the business and the revenue model is we take a very inefficient and very inaccessible market and we use technology in our network to create efficiencies for the driver and to increase availability and accessibility for the customer. We take about a 10% commission from one side of the market or the other, either the driver or the passenger, and it depends on the local market conditions. So, like London, taxi fares are quite high relative to, say, Boston or Chicago or places like that. And so the biggest problem that the drivers have is they want more people in their cab. They can't have people in the cab. So rather than increase the price to the passenger, we actually say, no, it's just the meter, no additional costs, not even credit card fees, which are very common to be charged in London, which means more passengers come on, which means that the drivers are very happy to pay that commission because the economics work. Now, in other cities like, let's say, Boston or Chicago, taxi drivers are earning less and fares are lower, and so but passengers are more than willing to pay a small premium, a Hailo fee, $1 or $1.50, in order to experience the cab coming to them and for the electronic hail. And so that's the model there. But all in all, it works out to about 10% for the efficiency that we create.
So once you launched your company in Toronto, there was an article in TechCrunch who mentioned that obviously the drivers, they need to have a smartphone to sort of, subscribe for Hailo Cab. But they say that about 70% of taxi drivers, they do not have smartphones. How do you deal with this issue? Do you help them to get some sort of deals, to get some smartphone, or you leave it by yourself?
I don't know the exact article that you're referring to, but actually we started this business with a belief that smartphones would become ubiquitous very quickly, and that actually that was not the view of the market before. So most of our competitors, they are still stuck in the rut of giving out smartphones. Now, from day one, we made the decision that we did not want to give out any hardware. Why? Because A, we wanted to be a very focused mobile application development business, no hardware. The second is we don't want to have to deal with legacy. We want to be able to move and develop as fast as the consumer internet smartphone technology evolves. And if we're giving out smartphones to the drivers, we can't just give them out for a year and then take them back. We'll never make any money. So actually, we're forced to give them out for years. But then the iPhone 4, you give them out, the iPhone 5 comes out, the iPhone 6. So you can never take advantage of these new technologies. So what we do is we let the market take care of itself. And what's actually happened is taxi drivers, it turns out, and that statistic I disagree with, it's actually the reverse. It's more than 70% of them probably do have smartphones now. So what's happened is taxi drivers have a higher smartphone adoption than the general population. Because if you can imagine, many of them, it's their only computer, and they're on the road all the time. So if you were going to invest in any piece of computing technology, what would it be? Couple that with the fact that prices are going down, data plans are becoming more expansive, and actually that's never been a problem in any city in which we've launched. So we've always had enough drivers who had phones. What we do is we partner with various organizations like telecom providers, and we offer drivers special deals they couldn't get anywhere else if they join Hailo, but it's their own phone and it's their own deal.
How many downloads of your application have you had by this moment?
So of the consumer application, we just crossed, I think, half last week.
So what's the next step? Are you seeking for new cities to expand, or are you going to focus on the markets that you already operate in?
Absolutely. Well, we're going to do both. So we are going to expand dramatically both the footprint as well as the services that we offer. And we have a great ideas for how we are going to take the network that we built and roll out additional services that will help increase efficiency and availability and convenience for passengers and drivers even more than our current product. And that really leverage the network that we've created to do more interesting things. And the second is we're going to spread our wings further into some of the largest and most sophisticated cities in the world. Unlike other companies, Hailo's model has been we can take any city's taxi system, no matter how well functioning it is, and we can we can, not literally, of course, but we can turbocharge it. We can make it better for both the passengers and for the consumers. And that might mean a New York, that might mean a London, that might mean a Tokyo. So it doesn't matter. We are solving a problem that actually most people in the cities that we go into, they don't think that anything's broken, but once they experience this, the driver and the passengers just immediately realize that this is the evolution of a hail, and this is what the future is going to be like. So we have made it our focus to start with the very big cities, London, New York, Tokyo, as well as Chicago, Boston, and satellite cities like Dublin. So what you can expect next year, I can't give you the full city list yet because we're still working on it. Madrid, Barcelona are confirmed. That's something that we're working on right now for early next year. Tokyo is something that we're working on also for early next year. We have an office in Shibuya. And we are looking at several other cities across both North America as well as Europe and Asia.
Well, in terms of launching a company, in terms of expansion, what was the hardest city actually to get in?
And I'll tell you why the hardest city was London. Two reasons. One, it was the first, which meant that we had the product was least evolved, least tested. We had to make some product decisions where if we got it wrong, I might not be here today. We just had to do the best we can. And we made the right decisions because we have an exceptional product design engineering team, really top-notch. And so better probably than most companies do, we really nailed the user experience, we believe, better than anybody else from the very beginning. But even so, we were starting relatively late. So when we started giving the app to taxi drivers in August 2011, we were the eighth app that had launched to the drivers. Now, most of them don't exist anymore, and some of them were very well funded and launched before us. And I think the fact that we've managed to grow many times larger than any other service in London is a testament to both the strategy as well as the execution and the team, both drivers and our staff for making it happen. They really are fantastic.
And so, speaking about the social side, what happens between the driver and the passenger? Because I guess the whole interaction process changed a little bit.
Well, it is interesting. Where you look at cities that adopt Hailo, some of the feedback you get are it makes the taxi experience more pleasurable for both because everybody's on a first-name basis. Literally. I mean, so the passenger receives the driver's first name, last initial, his photo, and his basically his identifier, and that basically license plate number, and so or door number in some cities. And the driver receives the passenger's first name and last initial, as well as they can communicate anonymously with one another. What we find is, the normal interaction in a cab is you get in, you tell them where you're going. It's very, it's very sort of clean, but it's not very emotive and it's not very social. It's not very human, right? With Hailo, what we find is, the first thing is before you get in the cab, the driver says, "Hey, what's your name?" Just to confirm that you are actually the person that he's supposed to be picking up. You know who the driver is. So immediately you've got a social connection that you know that person who's picking you up, which is not only safe, but actually, sometimes it starts a conversation. And actually everybody says the biggest comment amongst, our passengers is the quality of the drivers. The drivers really are the backbone of the system. They work very, very hard every day, generally, and they work very hard to protect and to ensure that the customers on Hailo have the best experience possible because it is their network. It belongs to them. It was made by taxi drivers for taxi drivers, and that will always be part of our DNA.
So, as an experienced entrepreneur, and you mentioned also that you managed to get some investors who had something to do with Facebook, Skype, Spotify, I think, as well. What would be your advice for startups, on getting the investment or getting the right type of investors for a business?
Well, so I think this is my second business, and The first business was very difficult. We survived a recession. We made all kinds of mistakes. We kept running out of money. We made all the classic startup mistakes. It wasn't nearly as successful as I had hoped it would be, to be perfectly honest. And in some ways, that's, you can do that as a bad thing, but actually, now looking backwards and trying to connect the dots looking backwards, it was the most valuable experience I ever could have had for this business, because not only did it give me experience and exposure to on-demand logistics and transportation and the kind of problems and solutions that we needed to make this Hailo really work, but also sometimes you meet some really great people who are just key, who you love to work with, who are key to making to making these ventures successful. So my advice would be, just get out there. Just get out there. If you've got an idea, if you want to, just get out there, just do it, just try and get as far as you can, as fast as you can, and really, don't worry if it doesn't work out at all, or if it fails quickly, or you have to come up with another idea, or if you, or if you crash and burn. I mean, basically, the most important thing, and the thing that I see in entrepreneurs is far too few people actually do it. So a lot of people talk about it, but then they don't actually make the jump. And I think once you make that jump, you're in a much better place than you are if you are, just thinking about it, or you think you can't get funding, et cetera, et cetera. So, and some people, will have to go through multiple times and multiple, series of success and failure before they can hit something that, they feel really works. And that's completely fine. I think people just have to get in there and actually do it, and get as far as they possibly can. And if it doesn't work, try it again.
What do you think is the best and the worst part of being an entrepreneur?
I think that the best part is the people. And by that I mean, and it's linked to what the worst part is. The worst part is the loneliness. So in the beginning, I can remember now because it wasn't too long ago, I was sitting in my apartment, all day, every day, because I had no office, whiteboards all over the place, and I was just thinking of ideas and things to do next. And to be honest with you, meaning that I would come up with an idea and I would fall in love with it for a period of time, but then I would go through this process of trying to basically due diligence it and trying to sell the product before it was built and all of that, and I realized it wouldn't work. And finally, when I came up with this idea, it was good enough to be able to convince some of my ex-colleagues and friends to join. So I knew it must be pretty good. And, and then, it goes from there. And, the greatest things are being able to hire people who then take that, either or whiteboard sketch and actually make it real. And then, going into Hailo Cab in London and hearing how we've helped drivers live a better life, and actually improve their standard of living, and how passengers just love the fact that it saved them in certain situations. I mean, it's great. So the feeling of fulfillment that you get from taking an idea and building a really fantastic world-class team who shares your passion and enthusiasm, and then to actually ride around in the results, is breathtaking. And for a business like this, to see it popping up in cities around the world and growing fast like that, it's very humbling.
Is there any book on entrepreneurship that you could recommend to everybody?
It's a good question. A lot of people ask me that. There were tons of them. I love all the Guy Kawasaki books, but the book that I would recommend that every entrepreneur read is Steve Blank's 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And it's about the customer development process. And the reason it's so important is, and it's sort of a negative thing in some respects, what it teaches you is that before you actually go do an idea, you should really go through a process of finding out what it is you're doing, what you're selling to, and there's some very simple things you can do to check if, not if it's going to work or not, but check if it's going to work or not, and actually actually, if you go through these processes, you will check against your own personal love and infatuation with the business, which is very important because everybody gets excited about ideas. And I had ideas that I loved, but because I went through this process, I realized they would never work. Never work. Went on top. So I think his lectures, which are online, and his book is just absolutely stupendous.
So before we proceed to the final part, the last question, if we speak about the future, the next 10, 15 years, which industries of business, which sort of areas of business will produce new fortunes, new Rockefellers?
Well, I think I know that mobile computing has the potential to radically transform the world in ways that we can't even comprehend right now. Right now, this kind of mobile internet, not constructed just of the masks or the actual telecom infrastructure that's pulling it together, but all of us and our devices running around. This ability for you to create applications that run off of this infrastructureless world and produce products and services that could never have existed before, we are just starting. And once we get to a point where smartphones are ubiquitous, really ubiquitous, and where things like payment and other elements have been made easier, I think that you will start to see dramatic and positive shifts in the way things work. And I think my personal driver in all of this is inefficiency. And the thing is, the world is a vastly inefficient place if you look at it, just a little bit closely rather than just your everyday gaze. There is so much opportunity for entrepreneurs to use this sort of technology and this sort of network to make to solve that a little bit and to vastly improve service for for millions and billions of people, really. So I think that's the one. The second that I'm very interested in, although it's very, very nascent, is to do with quantum computing and quantum simulation theory. I remain of the belief that actually there is the advances that will be created by those theories starting to become implemented in real products and services, devices, will also create immense opportunities both for the creators of those technologies and for people that will be able to use those platforms to create enormous value for the world.
Our final part is called table tennis set of questions, when we ask a simple question with answers as an option when you have to pick up just one.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand, but let's run through it.
You'll get it through.
Okay.
Steve Jobs or Bill Gates?
Steve Jobs.
iPhone, BlackBerry or HTC? Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Going to a party or staying home?
Definitely a party.
Which car, Mercedes or BMW?
BMW.
Fruits and vegetables or fast food?
Fruits and vegetables, definitely.
Egg or chicken, what came first?
I rather enjoy not knowing.
Being married or not being married?
Well, I'm not married right now, so I don't have too much frame of reference for anything other than that answer.
God believer or atheist?
I do, yes.
And the last question, for those people who are watching us right now and want to start up and create something, but are afraid or may have some doubt, what would you advise?
Just get out there and do it. I mean, I think a lot of people ought to really think about what's the worst that could happen. I mean, people worry about leaving their job. They worry about they worry about being branded as a failure when things don't work out. But in reality, their job is still there, and there are other jobs. And sometimes failure is the prelude to success. So I would encourage everybody to just get out there, take the plunge, and do it, and don't look back. And don't worry if it doesn't work out. I'm Jay Bregman. I'm the founder and CEO of Hailo, and thank you very much, In2up.